Who gets access to the future of medicine? Dr. Tyler Allen, a leader at Duke Cancer Institute, a voice rising at the intersection of research and community. From molecular biology to national platforms, he is confronting one of the biggest gaps in healthcare. Who gets invited into life-saving clinical trials and who gets overlooked? He is working to ensure Black, brown, rural, and faith-rooted communities are not afterthoughts for cancer research. He is pushing representation from the lab to the neighborhood, from theory to treatment, from data to real people. This is not abstract science. This is about trust, access, and survival. Dr. Tyler Allen is building the bridge. Eagles don't quack, we rise. Let's chop it up. Dr. Tyler Allen, how you doing?
Good, I'm good. Thank you for having me on, Tony. Appreciate it.
Thank you. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you chose to be here with us, and for that, we are grateful.
Hey, it's my pleasure. My pleasure. This is what I love doing, so I appreciate you having me on.
Thank you. So tell us a little bit about who is Dr. Tyler Allen? Where's home for you, and what do you consider home?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So I was born in Houston, Texas. That's where a large majority of my father's side of the family lives there. And then I would consider Houston my home. That's where I was born and mostly raised until I was about 13. And when I was 13, I moved here to North Carolina, and I went to high school in Durham. So this is, I call North Carolina my second home now. It's a home for me at this point. But yeah, so I'm a Texan by heart, but North Carolinian by choice now.
That is good to hear. So how do you feel about being in North Carolina? Were you in Houston long enough to know the difference, or do you favor one?
Yeah, so it's when I came, I was a child, so I was still 13, 14. So I feel like that transition from Houston to Durham, North Carolina, was a bit different because I had not really experienced Houston as an adult yet. So it was a bit of a change. But even I remember as a kid, like, it was a big change, like coming to Durham from Houston. Houston, I believe, third largest city in the country, and then coming to Durham, this was 20 years ago. Durham's expanded and grown a lot more, but even now, compared to Houston, Durham is very, very much smaller, very limited, and very slower pace. But Houston's got a lot going on. So it was one of the things that took an adjustment. But as I was here longer, it grew on me. And I feel like the longer you're here in Durham and Triangle, I feel like the more and more you love it and you get acclimated and you really see all the richness and culture and history and things that are going on here. And that really excites me about this area.
So you went from being a cowboy to a Southern boy.
Exactly.
So how was Tyler as a child? What did Tyler want to be growing up, or were you just trying to figure it out?
Yeah, I was always very inquisitive and curious. Like, even as a child, I would just go around and just ask people questions just all the time. Like, almost to the point where the people around me and adults, I'm sure they were like annoyed with how much questioning and things like that. But I wanted to know the why, the how, the what. Like, I wasn't just content with, okay, this is how it is what it is. I wanted to know. I was that kid, I was like, well, why is it this way? Why do clouds do this? Why is it, Earl, when you touch this stove, why is it this? Why does this happen? Why? So I was always asking for those type of questions. And I feel like that, later informed or led me to the path that I chose as a scientist, because really as a scientist, that's really all it is. It's just curiosity and asking questions and directing that focus and that interest into a, form that allows for the generation or the discovery of new data, new ideas, and new information.
So Tyler is growing up and you're going through high school and it's time to go to college. I believe you chose NC State, correct?
I did, yes. Wolfpack.
What about NC State drew you to the Wolfpack? Why NC State?
Yeah, I love the vibe of it. And they have such a strong science and engineering and STEM focus at NC State. And that really drew me to it. And one of the things that, and I encourage any either student or young person who's listening to this, is when you're thinking about what you want to do and where you want to go, and whether it be college or, even another choice, another option, go where you feel will be the best fit for you and where you will thrive and do the best at. Not necessarily what is told that you should do or what's expected of you, but where you feel you have the best experience and have the best contribution and the best, just overall time. And for me, NC State definitely was that for me because I went there for both undergrad and graduate school. So I was a student at State for, 8 years in total. So, lots of different experiences.
That's good insight. Dr. Allen, what sparked your curiosity about science and health? Did you always have that? I know you mentioned that you were a very curious youngster, but when you got to college, what made you say, hey, I'm going to commit to this science and I want to be a scientist?
Yeah. Yeah. So like I mentioned, I was always asking questions and inquisitive. And I feel like when I was in school, even in middle school and high school, I always gravitated towards the science and biology and those type of courses and learning about that. So it was a bit of a natural progression for me. When I was going into college, I knew I wanted to be a biology major. I wanted to do something in biology, either, biology, genetics, and that type of field. At the time, I was considering, medical school or research or what I wanted to do. I was still figuring some stuff out. And I decided that I didn't want to go down the path of medicine specifically, but research was really interesting to me. So as an undergraduate, I got a chance to work in a laboratory doing research or doing undergraduate research. And I just fell in love with it. I felt like it allowed me to use so many different aspects of myself, this inquisitiveness, the curiosity, my technical skills as a scientist and a researcher, my talent or wanting to know more and really push the field forward. And so it was a natural progression for me. And that really led me down the path of, okay, I want to be a researcher or a scientist and really digging into that pathway.
This is so good. I mean, I was looking forward to this interview for a while. And I'm so happy that a lot of our Black and brown kids can see someone that's not in entertainment, that's not chasing sports, but has a passion and vigor for science. And I was so excited to have this interview with you because you are a live, breathing example of other possibilities. And so we definitely appreciate you and the work that you're doing. And you and I are a seat on the cohort board over there at Duke. And so what or when or how did cancer specifically become part of your journey? How did you get on that track?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. A lot of people ask me that, and it's interesting because I don't have one of those standard stories where, when I was younger, I didn't have anyone who, in my family who had cancer, who died from cancer and sparked it. But it was one of those things that for me, I view cancer as almost like one of just the most fascinating diseases and disorders that there is because it's so dimensional as a disease. Like if you look at cancer and you really understand cancer at the biological and genetic level, like it's such a complex disease and has so many different types and different backgrounds and causes and progressions. It's like an entirely different ballgame when you're dealing with cancer. And so I was always fascinated by cancer specifically as just a disease, in comparison. And the thing that really stuck out to me about cancer is like, it's your own body. Like it's not a foreign entity or foreign pathogen or bacteria from outside. It's your own body in your own cells in your own body that are just misbehaving. And that was something that I just feel like I was always very fascinated about, like the body itself and learning about the body as a biologist. One of the things that got me into it is, learning about life itself. But then cancer, it was just such a unique disease that really drew me in and got me interested in. And, and also just, how broadly it affects people. And, I feel like everyone knows someone who's either had cancer,
Right.
a cancer survivor, has undergone treatments or something. So it affects like a large amount or majority of people in some way or another. So it was something that I was always interested in, just one on a kind of biological and scientific level, but then two, just on a, general personal level and seeing how it affects people and communities and those who are affected by it. So it was always an interest of mine.
It is the one illness that can bring a man or woman to their knees. It is universally known. We don't have to speak the same language, but everybody knows that word cancer, and it evokes certain emotions. When I heard the word cancer for the first time, it's a word that you can never unhear. And I tell people, I started living when I stopped being afraid of cancer, because cancer is just your body's way of saying something is really wrong. It's not bad, but it's telling you that we have gone to the part that we can't do anything else now but this. And so when I start looking at cancer as that and embracing it and not fearing it, but trying to learn and study, because it is a smart disease. When my CAR T didn't work, we even thought that it lost its sequence. The CAR T lost its sequence, or the cancer was evolving to even combat my CAR T cells that was engineered to fight it. And so, yeah, when you speak about the fascination of cancer, I think it scares a lot of people, because historically, when you hear someone say they have cancer, the outcome is death for the most part. And so when people talk to you about cancer and you're telling them, what do you do? How do you explain that to them in a layman's term and educate them, but take away the mystique and the mysteriousness about cancer at the same time?
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I'm glad that you brought that up. When I'm talking about cancer, one of the things that I like to, but one of the ways I like to describe it is, we say cancer, and we say cancer is almost just like a disease. But if you think about it, cancer, the term cancer, is almost an umbrella term for multiple different diseases. Like cancer, each case of cancer is almost, you can think of it at a medical and clinical level as it being a separate or individual disease. Like, and when I say that, I mean, you could have person A, person B. Both of them have, let's say, lung cancer. Both of them are lung cancer patients. They're receiving treatment. They have the same or similar type of lung cancer. But at the genetic and biological level, those two cancers can be very different. Even though they're both lung cancer, they can almost operate and respond like they're completely different diseases. And this is why, when a lot of times people say, well, why isn't there some universal cure for cancer? It's because cancer is so complex. And even if you have a treatment or a drug or therapy that works for person A and they have lung cancer, it may not work for person B, or it may work differently in person B, because even though they both have lung cancer, this person's cancer and the genetics and the biology and the etiology of this cancer are completely different and completely separate from this cancer. And so it's not always as cut and dry as we'd like it to be. And so the way I describe it is, cancer is a broad umbrella term for multiple different diseases, and we just call them all cancer. But it's really a multitude of, various different diseases that behave and respond and act very differently from even one another. That's how I would, describe it, or the way that I explain it when I'm talking to people.
As you give and you give this information, I look at it as being a series of exchanges, right? You are giving people information and knowledge about cancer and different types of clinical trials and ways to combat this sickness. But also, while you're doing that, you're taking in the emotions and all the complexities that humans bring with us, knowing that cancer is in their life now. How do you balance that? Who pours back into you when your cup is just empty and you have all this emotional, not baggage, but emotional situations that you've taken on dealing with people with cancer and hearing the conversations?
Yeah, well, I would say that's part of the reason why I got into this position or this field is I enjoy those type of interactions. I enjoy hearing about people's stories. I enjoy hearing about people's experiences and their perspective of cancer. Because, I feel like my background as a scientist and a cancer researcher, that's one component of me. But then another component of me is the person who is interested in, the people behind cancer, the communities that are affected, the organizations, the people, the real world, real life impact of cancer. And so having that background as a scientist, as a researcher, does help me articulate some of the scientific and medical things. But really, I enjoy interacting and hearing about how is cancer impacting people, real people, not just, petri dishes in a laboratory or samples in a research team, but real people, and how the work and the studies and the breakthroughs and cutting edge technologies that we've developed and have studied and put out there are impacting and helping people. And that's one of the things that I really enjoy about the Duke Cancer Institute, or DCI, is that there's a focus on it being an academic research institution, but there's also a large focus on, okay, so we're doing all this great cutting edge, groundbreaking research, but how is it relating to the patient? How is it relating to the community? How do we get that information out there? How do we form those connections and make sure that all the great work we're doing isn't just, you know, siloed in a laboratory or in a clinical research setting, but it's getting out there and it's having a real world impact on the people that we're wanting and developing these therapies for.
That's key. You said a key word. You enjoy it. And when you enjoy something, it brings happiness, and it's very rewarding to see that your work is being manifested and that it's impacting someone. You know, I think you're called for this, right? And you understand, people talk about your why, but not only do you understand the why, you understand the who. And sometimes the who get lost because we're so focused on results driven data, right? Or we're focused on the financial component of making money, but you understand the why now, and now you're pointing to the who this really serves. And that's why I applaud your research and your community work. And that kind of segues us to walk us through your journey of how you went from molecular and transitional research into community focused work at the Duke Cancer Institute.
Yeah, so it was a natural progression, and although it seems, you know, on paper probably a bit of a change, it was really easy because even as a scientist, even when I was a researcher, even when I was working in a laboratory doing, you know, just solely or mainly, you know, cancer research and biomedical and molecular biology type of research, I was always passionate about engaging with communities. Like even as a scientist, before my current position, I would go out and I would do outreach. I would go to schools and talk about, you know, my research or what I was doing as a scientist. I would go out to community events where I'm talking to non-scientists about the work I was doing. So it was always, you know, a passion of mine about, you know, science communication, making science accessible, talking about, because, you know, it's something that a lot of scientists, they don't develop all the ways that we're great at doing our research and having that technical mind, but then translating it and explaining it in a way that's accessible to just everyone who's not a scientist or even non, you know, medical type of individuals is something that's a particular skill. But I was always interested in that. So I always made an effort to develop that side of me. Even as a research scientist, I would, you know, take time and really focus on developing that outreach component and that connecting to real world people about, okay, this is the work that I'm doing, but how does this impact, or how can I explain what I'm doing and the impact that it's having on the cancer community, the biology community, and in that area. So it was a bit of a natural progression for me where I felt like I've accomplished a lot as a molecular biologist and a cancer research, and I'm very proud of the work that I've done to you know, really advance and push that field forward. But I'm really, you know, enjoying the work that I'm doing now, where I'm able to take that scientific expertise and apply it in a different manner, where I can then, you know, use that expertise and background to connect with the community and the patients and the people in a way that I really, you know, didn't always have the opportunity or the ability to do as a strictly just a research scientist before, a molecular biologist.
Well, in your bio, you mentioned reflect the population. And what does that mean? That means you want the clinical trial to reflect the population that it aims to serve. So why does that matter, Dr. Allen? Why does it matter for Black or brown or rural or low income people to have access to clinical trials?
Yeah. And that's a key point and kind of the pivotal, like really point of my current position, is to find ways to make sure that our clinical trials and our clinical research studies are reflective and representative of the populations that they're meant to serve. And what I mean by that, it's two different components. And I'll start. First one is the access. How I like to explain it is the health access and the health equity type of conversation. And this just means, okay, so we've got these cutting edge, groundbreaking research studies that can help people. We need to make sure that the populations in our areas equally are able to access this cutting edge research that is going to improve people's lives, is going to improve their diagnoses, is going to improve their treatments, and allow people to have enhanced care for whatever they're going through, cancer research, cancer therapy, cancer drugs, the whole 9 yards. So we need access, or we need our clinical trials, and we need the infrastructure to make sure that everyone is getting access to these trials and to these clinical research studies. It's just, a moral and ethical obligation for us as a medical facility to make sure that we're ensuring that that is being done. So that's one component. The other component, kind of putting my scientific hat on, is for us as a scientific institution, and for us to be a medical system, for us to say that we're doing clinical research, and for our studies and our work that we're doing, for us to be able to say at a biological, genetic, and clinical level that we're having rigor within our studies, we have to have different populations and have those populations be representative of who's actually going to get these treatments. Because if not,
right.
then we cannot accurately say, as scientists, as physicians, as medical research, staff and professionals, that our studies are scientifically rigorous and valid. Because the only way to know that is to test them in all the populations that are going to be receiving these studies. Because, we know race, ethnicity, things like that, they are social constructs, but there are very real biological and genetic components that respond differently to treatments, that have differences in rates of disease, of response to treatments for therapies, drugs. And so there are very real genetic and biological components that are linked to things like differences in ancestry and representation, that the only way for us to, as a scientific community, be able to confidently say that our studies are looking at this is for us to have a representative population being enrolled in these studies to help make and inform these decisions and results.
It is so difficult because across the board, we are finding it is challenging to get Black and brown indigenous people to participate in these trials. That is the question that we're trying to solve. That's what we're solving for. And so, but when I speak to people, one question I always get is, okay, if I did participate in the clinical trial, what's next? So let's say they get in the trial and they find success. Where do they go after the trial? Because the trial is over. They may have seen improvement in their condition, but they can't afford anything beyond the trial. They can't afford any additional treatment. They can't afford the more intrinsic type of treatment that may cost more because based on insurance. And so where do they go after the trial? That's the question that I get the most now. Okay, we've convinced them to do the trial. They see the necessity in it, but they're still fearful because they say, hey, if this is working, am I going to get dropped on my head, because I can't do the next step after that?
Yeah, and that's an excellent point and a huge concern for you. Said, like a lot of people, when you are on a trial and you are getting these cutting edge, groundbreaking research, either therapy, drugs, or whatever else, and then after the trial, there's a lot of questions that people have. What are the next steps? Will I be able to still continue getting the research? What does this look like for me in my current state of my prognosis or where I'm headed? And it's a multifaceted issue. And I feel like the crux of it is that a lot of times, again, two components, these research studies, a lot of times they're looking at how effective or how useful or how effective these studies or these drugs or therapies are going to be. And a lot of times they have great results with them, but sometimes, they don't. Sometimes they don't always work, or sometimes they don't. So the clinical research and the clinical trials, they really help us to know and understand better at a clinical and medical level how these drugs and how these therapies are working, how these treatments are working, so that when they do become more broadly accessible, we're not just blindly, guessing how they're going to work. We have evidence, scientific evidence that shows, okay, these are safe, these are effective, these work in all different types of populations, these work in all different backgrounds. So one way that I encourage people to look at it is, one, you're getting treatment yourself, where you're getting access to cutting edge, research, therapies, drugs that a lot of times aren't even publicly available yet. But then two, you're also helping to advance the field of science and the future of science and medicine because the results from this clinical trial or clinical study, they're helping you as well, but they're also informing the next generation or the next iteration of how these therapies and, drugs and cancer drugs will be implemented and used across the medical landscape. So I feel like having that perspective and that dual look at it is really key, because you're helping yourself by participating in the clinical trial, but you're also helping advance and push forward the entire field of medicine, so to speak.
It's all about access, and your research helps determine the amount of the options. You have more options, right? More viable options. I look at most of the time when you are diagnosed with cancer, first line of defense is chemo. But do you think we ever get to a point that we don't have to look at first line, second line, third line defense, and whatever works is what that person can get? So if we know CAR T is the most effective, or some bispecific or whatever it is, then can we get that first and skip the chemo? It's almost like, we're so pegged into these orders, but your research is telling us and finding solutions, but oftentimes we don't get the solutions initially. You got to go through phase, this step, and this step. If that fails, go to 2. If that fails, go to 3. But we know 3 works, and we know 3 is the better option. And so are you seeing that in your work or in the communities? Do people pose those kind of questions to you about, like we just mentioned, can I get access to this? Or am I being the person that's going to give someone else access to it and still put it out of reach for the people?
Yeah, that's a key point to emphasize. Is a lot of times, like what you're talking about, is there are multiple different treatments, and depending on like we said, cancer is very different from each person to each person. The different stages, different types of cancer, different people who have different responses. So a lot of the times, so I will say, every therapy for cancer has gone through a clinical trial, clinical research. And that means, chemotherapy, CAR T, immunotherapies, any type, like radiation therapies, any type of, modern day cancer, or just, research, therapies in general, has gone through multiple years and, very meticulous clinical research studies. So these studies or these drugs are known to, like, we have really good information about how they work in people, how safe they are, how effective they are in different populations. And so when people are, at a hospital or seeing the doctor and they're prescribed a certain treatment, it's because that treatment, based on the data, is thought to be the most effective for that specific point in time for where that patient is at currently. And so what I mean by that is, there may be all these different types of treatments, but the clinical research team and the physician and the clinical researchers and the staff and the hospital staff, they're looking at the complete picture of the person. So where are they at? What's their background? What type of prognosis or disease do they have? All these different factors to make an informed decision about, okay, given all these components, these moving parts, this is the best strategy that we recommend right now. And then if this, needs to be progressed, or if this does or doesn't work, then we can move to this next best strategy. So it's a bit more complex than, okay, we know this will work, because, sometimes a lot of times the way that the sequence is set up is that's supposed to be most effective and safest and most efficient, and then go down the line from there. And so there are a lot of different moving parts. And so it can sometimes seem like, why can't I just have this one? Or why don't we just start here? Yeah. Because, each case is so different. It's almost impossible to have a blanket approach to all cancers. Because like we mentioned before, every cancer is almost a different disease. So you have to take a different approach a lot of times to these different cancers.
I love how you broke that down, and I'm glad we kind of segued into that, because I think when this is being explained to a cancer patient for the first time and you're talking about their protocol, it is often not explained in that way. This is the most effective. This is what we have seen. You kind of leave them to speculate on why they're getting what they're getting, and that leads them to feel like they may be being dismissed. But if it was explained a little bit better, almost as like what you just said, then it kind of helps reassure that patient that we have done our studies and this is the most effective, and they're not feeling dismissed. My cousin mentioned to me when she was getting her protocol, and she said one of her biggest fears was, as an African-American woman, she didn't want to feel like she was being dismissed. And I paused for a minute and took that in, because for her, that was a real world moment. I didn't feel that way. And I know her team isn't doing that, but for her to think that, it kind of points back to a lot of the misconceptions. So in your research and in your working in the community, what are some of those things, and how do you assure people that a clinical trial is a good option for them, and they're not going to be like Henrietta Lacks or Tuskegee or anything down that line?
Yeah, and those are very real concerns and very real feelings that people have. And a lot of it, the responsibility is on the medical facility and the actual physicians and medical facility to help people not feel that way.
That's right.
It's not the onus or the responsibility should not be on the patient who is potentially a cancer, patient or someone just diagnosed with a disease, for them to either feel or to have to behave in a way where they don't feel that way. It should be on us as a medical facility, as researchers or scientists, as doctors. We need to make sure that we're intentional about how we communicate, about how we respond. Initiatives like we're doing at the Duke Cancer Institute, where we're actively engaging communities and helping to demystify and destigmatize some of these either misconceptions or feelings or perceptions around medicine, medical research, clinical trials, talking about some of the real world implications of some of the past or prior things that have happened in medicine. Like you said, Henrietta Lacks and Tuskegee and those types of things, and really having an emphasis on how those things shaped the current landscape and the current protocols of what we do now to ensure that things like that never happen again, and are never able to happen, and are not even allowed to happen in the current wheelhouse and structure of medical research now. So, like I said, the onus and the responsibility is really on the medical side. And that's really why, positions and programs like, what we have, and conversations like this, where we can explain and talk about and reach people who because, if you're going to a hospital and going to a doctor, sometimes people just aren't comfortable with having a conversation or being completely transparent or honest with, either their physician or the hospital staff, just, because there may be a big difference in how they feel uncomfortability or the way that they feel seen or heard. And that's why it's really important for our physicians to have exposure, and our clinical research staff to have exposure to community members, to patients from all different walks of life, and to have, that experience themselves, to be able to articulate in a way that's accessible. Okay, this is why I'm, recommending this, or these are the options, and this is why. Not just, okay, I recommend this, and we're going to go from here, but really explaining and having that dialogue with the patients, which, is something that not all physicians are, people who work at hospitals or even in academic institutions, it's not a skill that everyone is either taught or develops. And so that's
right.
You're not just all the time born with that skill. That's something that, and a lot of times you don't learn that in medical school or graduate school or,
right.
Scientists, how to communicate with people who are not scientists, or with patients, or with, general audiences. And so we really, at DCI and the Duke Cancer Institute, we have a strong emphasis on promoting and helping to strengthen the work that our amazing physicians and clinical staff are doing, so that they are better to articulate and connect with those patients, so that people do feel comfortable with their interactions, with asking questions, and with moving forward with any of these research programs or opportunities.
Yeah, you want to keep a humanizing approach, because we're still humans first. We still are emotion driven. We're talking to Dr. Tyler Allen, rising above barriers in cancer research and community equity here. Dr. Allen, the church and Black and brown communities are still an essential pillar in the community, and it's still a place that we go to get a lot of our information. If a young pastor or a health minister leader or a lay leader is listening right now, and they want to do more surrounding cancer, or just any of these other modalities that can lead up to cancer, what's a practical first step that they could partner with you on, or take a different approach to start educating their congregants?
Yeah, and that's really important because, like you said, that community, the faith-based and church communities, for a lot of our underserved and underrepresented and Black and brown communities or members, that's the first place that they go to when they get some type of diagnosis, or if they're wanting to seek counsel, is their church, their
That's
pastor,
right.
bishop. And so we really, part of my position and part of what we do at the Duke Cancer Institute is to form and develop these initiatives and these programs and these dialogues and conversations with our faith-based organizations. So I would say if there's anyone listening who is interested in either developing that partnership, please reach out to me personally or to our team, and we can have these conversations because we already have a lot of established connections with, our faith-based organizations within the area and the surrounding areas. Like there's a huge change or a huge increase in just the ability or the desire to participate in certain things or treatments or even clinical trials if it is linked or if it comes from a trusted source in the community. And a lot of times that is the church, that's the pastor, that's that trusted person who, if people are going through something or have any type of diagnosis, that's a scary time. That's a
It is.
lot going on. You may not feel as comfortable going to a hospital or a doctor or speaking to someone who is essentially somewhat a stranger to you. You want someone who you connect with, who you can feel comfortable with. And I feel like the churches and faith-based organizations and just community organizations in general provide that space. So we have a real strong emphasis on partnering and encouraging that multi and bidirectional collaboration with our community and faith-based organizations on ways we can either come and present. You can have materials that we can provide. We can talk more about it. We can provide contact information about, ways to talk about this more, get help for your cancer journey or just, journey in health in general. So
You lean on your spirituality. And for a lot of these communities, their faith is based on their belief that when all else fail, God can do this. But I tell people that God works in mysterious ways. He created Dr. Tyler Allen and he created Tony Williams and he created other scientists and all these people, and he works through them sometimes. And that is his divine work. I think we in the church, sometimes we get caught up in so much of the impossible, but we're not in the present, that God is moving right now in the present, but you're looking for something that's impossible. And I think if we can bridge that gap and let people know that that's okay, this is still, your faith is still in action. And I think that's where we are kind of trying to, as we get into the community, we're trying to educate them. We're breaking down a lot of barriers. Number one, how they feel about healthcare. Number two, how does this infringe upon their belief in God that he can do the impossible? So there's a lot of things going on when you're trying to get the Black, brown, indigenous people into this mindset that a clinical trial or just simply going to the doctor is part of your way of life. So you are 100% correct.
So take this
Go ahead.
quick on that. So one of my colleagues, Valerie Worthy, she has the scripture that she uses sometimes in presentations. So 3 John 1:2, and it's, beloved, of all things, I wish you to prosper in health as thou prosper in your soul. And so what I'm saying is, your soul is one aspect, your spirit is one aspect, but God wants us to prosper in our health as well.
He sure does.
Medicine, that is one of the ways that God facilitates us to prosper in our health. Is getting, medical treatment, all the great therapies, drugs, and things that were created. These were developed and these were meant to help us. These were put on this earth and in this place to help us to have health and to, not only have spiritual health and health for our soul, but for our bodies to be healthy as well. So God wants us to be holistically healthy in our endeavors.
Well, none of this works if you're not healthy, right? If you're not healthy, then you're a poor representation of what God can do, because somebody looking at you is like you being an obese fitness trainer. Well, you're not going to get clients because they're going to say you're not even in shape, right? Or, health provides us with this opportunity to carry forth work, whether it's physical work or spiritual work. I tell people all the time, some of the most unhealthiest men I've seen in America are preachers. but yet they're talking about health and these things. So we have to kind of peel back and look at the real issues that we're having and what are we actually representing based on what we're actually saying. And if God said this in his word, then we know that's important, you know? So don't get me started. I'm a PK kid. I can ramble, get the going on that. So Dr. Allen, when you look at the initiatives that you're leading, how do you know if they're working? And what are the signs that representation in your clinical trials are improving?
Yeah. So there's a few different ways. I would say the biggest one is that the biggest one that I would say we know it's working is when we look at the numbers and we see the numbers of enrolled for certain demographics like our Black and brown and underserved communities, and it's going from one level and it's increasing to another. That's probably the biggest, most direct metric or way that we have to track is our enrollments and how many people are getting access to these cutting edge groundbreaking treatments, how many people are benefiting from this work that we're doing, and how does that look over time. But then also things like perception, like we talked about, just how comfortable people are with clinical trials or thinking about clinical trials, how comfortable they are with engaging with clinical trials or clinical research. And so that, which is a bit, harder sometimes to quantify, is that perception of people and people's comfortability. But that's also very important because the only way for people who are hesitant about clinical trials or maybe have some barriers to joining or participating is you have to address those barriers. You have to address that mistrust first, or otherwise the enrollment and the access and all the other things is a moot point. A lot of times we see people struggle, especially with our underserved and underrepresented communities. There are logistical barriers, things like to participate in care or clinical research, you have to find sometimes transportation to get to the treatments. You have to find time off. If you have a job where you're working and you have to request time off, you have to find childcare. If you have kids and they're, being taken care of, you have to find, all these different things that are a component of the clinical trial and clinical research that may not be, directly related to you getting care, but impact how available or how you're able to participate in the clinical trial or just research in general or just, getting treatment. So it's a lot of different things, but the biggest thing is seeing how we can increase these numbers so that the demographics and the way that our population looks in the Durham area, the Triangle, and even beyond, patients that we're seeing and treating and helping and the lives that we're saving, making sure that those numbers match the population of our communities and who we're seeing in the community. That's the biggest, I would say, way to track it is when we have a more equal representation of who's being treated and whose lives are being saved and having that match the amount and the different types of people that we're seeing in our communities.
I love how you said that. I call it, you have to manage the information skillfully. And when you were in Dubai last week, I was watching your panel and you were speaking about AI. And one thing that I love that you said was the question someone asked, would AI replace doctors or scientists or doctors? And you said, no, it's not going to replace them, but it's going to replace the ones that aren't adapting to the AI. And I love that. So when you said that, it made me wonder, like in 10 years from now, and AI definitely will be further along, how does Dr. Allen see AI helping with clinical trials, data analysis, and just your work? And then to the general population of how that can help the general population move forward.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of potential for just artificial intelligence, machine learning, and just technology to advance how we're working with clinical research, with patient care, and advancing it. And a lot of it is already being implemented, Tony. Like I was at a different conference last week in Orlando that was on clinical research and just, clinical research care. And a large focus of this conference was talking about how AI is already being integrated into a lot of the ecosystem of patient care, of health, of cancer research, and just, healthcare in general. And it's, it's a lot of potential. Like, for example, sometimes when patients or potential participants are being enrolled in a trial, they have to meet certain eligibility criteria to enroll or to be eligible for the trial. And so, for example, AI can look at a patient's data and can look at their background. And then it can use, machine learning algorithms and technology to look at their background and then match it to clinical trials or clinical studies that this person would potentially be eligible for, and just do it automatically rather than a person having to sift through a person's, how old are they? What's their diagnosis? What's their background? Manually do it. Like AI can do it almost in an instant at this point. So
That's right.
leveraging technologies like that is going to be the future, not only just for cancer care, but also where the research and cancer development field is going, where, a lot of these studies and a lot of these trials and treatments, they will be advanced and pushed forward and really accelerated by the technology and AI moving forward. So it's an exciting time, Tony. But I feel like there's already a lot that is being done. And then in the next 5 to 10 years is going to be a completely different game in terms of what's able to be done in the care that's able to be given using AI and technology as a resource.
Is that something that makes you hopeful, or what are you hopeful for?
Yeah, I would say honestly, I'm hopeful, and I'm really excited about where the field is going. Like in the next 5 to 10 years, I feel like the landscape of medical care, cancer care, and just, medicine in general is going to be a completely different ballgame. And things that we are struggling with now, medically, clinically, in our understanding, are going to be so much further advanced and further along. And there are going to be certain treatments, there are going to be certain abilities that scientists and researchers and doctors and physicians will have access, and abilities that they will be able to do at such a larger scale that it's going to really improve and accelerate and enhance the entire medical field, and especially cancer and cancer research and cancer treatment is going to get, accelerated to the point where I feel like the technologies and the treatments that we have now versus the technologies and treatments that will be in existence and developed and mature 5 and 10 years from now is going to be exceptional.
We have a very diverse listening crowd, and I think I told you that Dr. Terrell Coring and myself were doing a series called Missing at the Table, and then we also want to turn that into a conference. And for our listeners out here, now we have Dr. Tyler Allen on board.
I'm ready.
So Dr. Allen, if young people, some of our younger listeners are listening, and we're talking about STEM and we're talking about missing at the table, what would you tell them, and how would you encourage them to consider this type of work or medical work or something in the STEM field?
Yeah, I would say your background and your interests and your abilities, like, they're there, and you just have to figure out the best way to utilize them, because you already have the talent, you already have the intelligence, you already have the ability. All you have to do is find out the best way to utilize what you already have been given and what you already have to make the biggest impact, and to be most fulfilled in what you're doing, and happy about the contribution that you're giving to society and the world. And that's another thing that I'm really excited about, in the next 5 to 10 years, is seeing what all the exceptional young people in this field are doing, and what they're going to be able to do, and what they will do and will achieve in the next, 5, 10, and several decades, because there's a lot of exceptional talent out there. And there's a lot of talent that's not even reached the maturity level yet, where they're able to even input all of their talents and abilities yet. So, really nurturing and guiding and seeing where this talent is going to be something that's very interesting and exciting. But I would say definitely, just figure out what your why is, because that's the biggest thing. Like, what makes you tick? What gets you excited when you wake up in the morning? And follow that, whether it's science, whether it's technology, whether it's engineering, math, or even something outside of that, or something else. Whatever you're interested in and you're passionate about, and you can contribute to society, follow that passion, and, just make the most of what you're doing.
I love that answer. Hey, you want to do a quick rapid fire?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. All right. So, early bird or night owl?
Well, I'm definitely an early bird. I can't get anything done at night. I can't. My brain shuts down.
You always been like that?
Always, even when I was a kid, I used to wake up early in the morning just to finish my homework because after a certain time, I just my brain is like, you can stay up, but I'm not gonna help you do anything.
All right. Coffee, tea, or herbal tea?
Well, Tony, is it herbal tea a type of tea? How's that?
Because there's basic teas, right?
Well,
There's the crappy tea, and then you got the herbal. Look, I make herbal teas, right? I use the actual root to come out of the ground, so I wanted to make sure you understood that.
but now I'm going to herbal tea then, yeah, because I'm not a person.
Yeah, all tea is not the same.
Herbal tea, I go with that.
Yeah, see, that's your science brain, and that was my engineering brain.
Yes.
Lab meeting, community event, or church fair?
Well, again, I'll say church fair is a community event, so I'll say community event. Definitely at this point, that encompasses the whole thing.
The whole thing. Okay. A song. I know you're a musician, so a song that gets you through during tough times.
Anything Stevie Wonder, but if I had to choose one, it would be Another Star by Stevie Wonder. That's probably one of my favorite songs of all time. Gets me through anything I'm going through.
Interesting. I'm gonna have to go back and listen to that.
Yeah, it's one of my all-time favorite just artistic outputs of all time in general.
I'm a commission guy. I feel like the music they were making is timeless, and I can listen to commission all day long.
Okay.
That's one of my favorite groups. One habit you try to keep for your own wellness.
Early morning workouts. I'm real big into working out in the morning. I feel like that grounds me, keeps me focused, and gets me energized and prepared for the day.
What kind of workout? You got something in particular that you do?
Yeah, it depends.
Overall,
but I guess some days I'll do like calisthenics, body workout. Then some days I'll run, and then I bike. Sometimes in the afternoons or evenings. So I try to stay active.
Hold on, you bike?
Yeah, you're right.
Who you ride with?
I mostly just ride around in Raleigh. I don't do any of the official trails or official bike groups and stuff like that. I kind of more so just use it as a zen time for me to just zone out and kind of just relax with myself for a long time and kind of enjoy or take in some of the scenery.
Okay, I was trying to recruit you. I'm the president of Team Flow. Yeah, I started Team Flow 2010.
Okay.
That's my club. So we got several racing divisions and all of that. So I'm the guy that started that.
Okay. Circle back with that.
Yeah, circle back, get you out there and see what you got. Yeah. I don't ride as much now because Dr. Grover kind of prohibited a little bit, but I was bad when I was on them wheels, and I pop back every now and then and jump on the A team and give them the business.
I feel like getting out there on the bicycle.
It is. It's very therapeutic. If you weren't working in cancer research and equity, what do you think you'd be doing?
Something with music. Somebody musically inclined, be a songwriter or a producer, something like that.
Well, you still can do that. Yeah. Do you write much music now?
I do. Yeah, it's like a hobby of mine, or kind of like a non-scientific. When I'm wanting to get out of the scientific medical side of things, I go into music. So I'm big into listening to music, going to musical concerts, experiencing music as a listener, but also a producer, as a songwriter. And it's kind of my escape music. I go to that. There's a concert in Greensboro coming up that I'm looking forward to it. New Edition, Boys to Men, and Tony Braxton. I'm going to go see.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
A few weeks from now. But yes, I love just anything music, live music, listening to music, playing music, writing music. I'm a music lover.
I love that too. What's your favorite board? What board you rocking?
Like keyboard? The one I got here, I guess for those in the stream who can't see the office, I got a keyboard right here. This is the Alesis or Coda right now. It's one of those where it mimics the feel of an actual keyboard in terms of the weight of the keys. Because I like my keyboards and my boards to have that weighted feel when I'm playing on it, so it feels like I'm playing the actual piano, even though it's.
I love that.
Intense.
I love that. We got to link up on some of this music.
Yeah.
One thing you wish every listener today can take away from this conversation, whether it's faith communities, community leaders, what's that one thing you want to leave with them?
I would say if there's any, I guess, hesitancy or doubt in your mind about either just clinical research or studies or even just medicine in general, I really implore and encourage everyone to do as much research and exploring and really seeing how things are now and how impactful a lot of the research and cancer care, just care in general is, because there's a lot of great opportunities. And like we said at the beginning, everyone knows someone who has been touched by either cancer or some other type of disease or is going through something now. And, there's a lot of great resources out there, a lot of either diseases, and especially with cancer, the sooner it is looked at and the sooner it is treated and the sooner that it can be detected, the better off your chances are. So I really implore everyone to, even if you are hesitant, even if you are maybe afraid or have some stigma or hesitancy around things, really, really push yourself. And I really encourage everyone, implore everyone to, speak with someone about it and reach out. And whether it's a trusted person, like we were saying, church, pastor, or even your physician or hospital or someone like me, reach out and talk and get this information and get these benefits as much as you can. There's a lot of great work that's being done out there. There's a lot of great mission and driven and things that are happening, and look forward to seeing everyone or anyone at some of these community events that we have, in my role, and is in, just some of the events that we've got coming up for this year and in the future.
Dr. Allen, how can people find you? What's your handles?
So I have an email that they can reach me at. I don't do the social media too much, but my email is Tyler Allen, and that's ALLEN at duke.edu. So if you ever want to either reach out or contact me, feel free to do so through there, and you're happy to connect or talk more with anyone or anywhere about any of the topics that we discussed or anything I didn't discuss too.
Thank you. Dr. Tyler Allen, thank you for soaring with us on Eagles Don't Quack, showing us how faith, community, and science can lift us all above challenges. Listeners, if this episode moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Follow the Olandis Foundation, www.theolandisfoundation.org for more on health equity, mentorship, and real talk. Find Eagles Don't Quack on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or WARR Radio 103.5 FM, 1520 AM. Eagles Don't Quack, and we'll see you next time. Dr. Tyler Allen, thank you for being here with us.
My pleasure. I appreciate you having me on.
Have a great day.
You too.
Thank you.